Hi everyone and welcome to the Dynamics 365 Practice Show. Today we're going to talk about an overlooked process that affects user adoption, that is quality assurance. We have on the show Sahadevan, who established his own quality assurance business, Test House Limited, about 20 years ago, focusing on IT risk mitigation and in recent years specifically focusing around Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. But before we get underway with the show, I just want to talk about MapTasker, a company I'm working with. They are a geospatial ISV. And so when you hear geospatial, you think maybe maps. Well, MapTasker is much more than a map visualization tool. MapTasker enables both field and office staff to collaborate effectively through the means of map with their field sales for Dynamics 365 and field engineer for Dynamics 365 products. Any business running a field-based team would benefit from better collaboration between field and office staff. MapTasker helps organizations increase productivity while reducing operational cost. If you're ready to embrace the power of geospatial intelligence, MapTasker has use cases from large government and corporate organizations through to small SMEs and charities. So get in touch with them at maptasker.com. Now, let's get on with the show. Remember, full show notes can be found at nz365guy.com/130. Sug, welcome to the Dynamics 365 show.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks very much for inviting me. It's a great privilege and an honor to come here.
Thank you. So first of all, I always like to kick off my shows with kind of like getting to know you and letting the audience kind of get a feel for who you are. So tell us a bit about where you're based and where you currently work, and what you do.
Okay, well, I'm based in London, in East End of London to Docklands, and that's where we're based. Our office is based, and I work for a company. Well, in fact, I helped found the company. I am the founder of the company.
Wow.
Of a company called Test House, and it's been about 20 years or so now that we've been going, purely focused on testing and IT risk mitigation, trying to find risks within IT implementations. That's what the focus was on. So the idea was based around the fact that, at that time was that you could buy software A, B, and C and put it together and make an organization run it efficiently. But the challenge has become that the A, B, and C has to talk to each other and integrate with each other. So I felt that the testing would be a key area. So that's how we started.
Oh, very good. So have you always lived in London?
I was actually, I'm originally from a place, my parents are originally from a place called Kerala in South India.
Wow.
And I was born in Singapore, and I came to East London when I was probably about 5 or 6. So been here most of my life, yeah.
How interesting. So origins in India, but you were born in Singapore.
Yeah. In fact, if I do 2 years of military service, I'm told that I can get my Singapore citizenship if I want to.
Wow. But I don't think that's on your agenda, is it?
Not at the moment.
So have you travelled much with your role, or are you pretty much London-centric?
No, I mean, we're a global organization, so we have an office in Kerala in India. Wanted to do something from where I originate. So I travel to there quite a bit, and we do a lot of business in the Middle East. So I'm constantly there in the Middle East and also in the US. And I try to visit Microsoft as often as I can in Seattle. So I'm traveling around quite a bit, actually.
Wow. Okay. So when you're not working, what do you do for enjoyment in London?
I'm a bit of a sad person, really, but I love...
That's an interesting way to describe yourself.
I'm an avid fan of astronomy, so I try to read about it, try to watch videos on it, try to understand it, try to see if there's anything I can add to increase the knowledge, because it's, we think about our problems every day, and then when I look at the size and the vastness of the universe, you just think, we're tiny little problems in a very big universe. Yeah. So that's very fascinating for me. So I spend a lot of time with that. I do a bit of sports, play badminton.
Okay.
And also I go to the gym a lot. So that's me.
Very nice. So just on the astronomy side, do you have your own telescope, or do you go to observatories?
No, I go to observatories mostly, But it's more about understanding not actually looking at the stars, but understanding the science behind it.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. As in, I remember at a party once chatting to a guy who was very much into astronomy, and it's just such a it's almost a never-ending conversation,
It
and
is.
as you explore it.
I mean, yeah, if I meet somebody else who's interested in astronomy, we just go into a tangent and never stop.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. So Chris Huntingford introduced us, and it was around your expertise in the area with Microsoft Biz Apps and quality assurance. And I'm interested in understanding, when you think of Microsoft Business Applications and quality assurance, what's the type of, things that are top of mind that people should be thinking about when it comes to quality assurance?
Well, it's a number of things. For instance, the D365 as a whole is, it's a set of products, and people can buy the product and run it as in a vanilla state. But as businesses get more and more complex, they tend to do more configuration, customization, integration. And people, obviously, I'm not trying to tell everybody knows all this, but people write applications on top of D365 and
Yeah.
they don't and present itself to a certain vertical marketplace. So it isn't just D365 is the core component, but there's things on top of that. And the things you've got to be, when you're looking at quality assurance on D365, is you've got to be careful that you don't retest what Microsoft's already tested.
Yeah.
You've got to test something which is going to be really going to impact the business and has high priority and things like that. So that's what you've got to look for. So don't retest what's already been tested, and look at the complexity of testing.
Yeah, very good. So tell me, what makes up quality assurance process? What are the moving parts? What are the people involved? And how does a quality assurance a project, I suppose? How does it run?
Well, ideally, there's people working now on the agile mode or the waterfall mode, and some people are usually now adopted DevOps as well. So you need to plug in quality into the different modes of operation. And some people even use not even waterfall or agile; they use something called wagile. I think that's a term that's been developed now. But whatever the mode of implementation, the testing has to be implemented in some way within that landscape. So ideally, the quality assurance piece should be from building in quality from the idea of the inception stage all the way through to delivery. So you don't just bring in testing at the last part. You look at quality assurance as the process of how you're going to develop the software from inception, an idea from the business, and says this is what we want to do, and all the way to implementation through the analysis stage or the defining the user stories or whatever methodology you follow, and then to make sure the quality at the end is a good product. So understanding the quality requirements, because they're quite important. What is the quality requirement? And it can vary from project to project, from organization to organization, because it can all be different for different people. And understanding the product risks. What is the risk within this product? So it could be that the product is very, very technically complex, or it could be that it is very business critical. So understanding the product requirements and understanding the product risk is very important. And then to define a product acceptance criteria using quality gate. So you need to think of yourself as a quality gate and say, look, somebody's delivering me this at the end stage. They've gone through all this DevOps and agile or waterfall process, and they're giving me this piece of software, whether it's internal or an external company delivering it. I need to be the quality gate to say, this is acceptable to be received into production, and this will not impact my business.
Interesting. So when you talk about quality requirements, what do you commonly hear quality requirements for a Dynamics 365 project?
It could vary from a different stages. So, for instance, it could be talking about the functional quality requirements. Does it work? Does it do what it's supposed to do? It could be from a security perspective. It could be from a performance and scalability perspective. Is it going to scale up to the number of users that I can scale up to? I'm going to do this marketing exercise, and when I do that marketing exercise, I'm going to have a peak load. Is it going to cope with that? So it could be anything along those lines too. I need a quality requirement that says I want 0 defects. It's just going to be slightly impossible to do in production, or I can accept 10% leakage of errors into production. That kind of thing we just really need to find down and understand what is the business prepared to accept.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And then you talked about risk. Tell me specifically in the area of Dynamics 365, what are you commonly seeing as risks that companies are wanting to mitigate?
Again, I said the functionality
Yep.
is the key component and the end-to-end process. So the risks are things like when it comes to integration to different systems or in the customization or configuration changes. How do you test those? How do you make sure that the defects are going to be reduced? What do you do
Mm-hmm.
to do that? So that's the element of risk that you've got. So you've got the product risk in terms of things. You go into production and some start using something and it starts failing, falling
Mm-hmm.
over, or it doesn't calculate. Say for instance you take the customer to or the prospect to cash kind of workflow from start to finish. So you got a prospect, you then turning him into a customer, you raise a PO, and then from there you go more or less going on to FinOps.
Mm-hmm.
And in FinOps, so is that information transfer, is that sort of reasonably accurate, or not reasonably accurate, but pretty accurate? And then from FinOps side, it then goes on to raising the PO, getting the money in, and getting the cash side, and
Mm-hmm.
consolidating and making sure that the money received is what you thought you were going to have. So
Mm-hmm.
how are you going to take that end-to-end process and test it? That's the sort of risk that we look at.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent. And you also talked about acceptance criteria, and you mentioned quality gates. Now, just the picture that came into mind is that it wasn't just a single gate. Are you kind of putting quality checks at various stages across a process, and how does that work?
Yes, I mean it should be. So the normal channels are people use an implementation partner for D365.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking specifically about D365.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
an implementation partner will come along and they will say, right, we will deliver this and we will deliver this and we will deliver to you after we've done unit testing.
Mm-hmm.
The definition of unit testing could be slightly different between different partners. My understanding of unit testing is when you develop a small piece of code, you do the unit testing. But in some cases, they're talking about units of functionality, and does that functionality work? So the unit testing could be different. But whatever the unit tests they test is what they do, and then that's their contractual obligation to deliver that once they've that unit test. But that doesn't mean the customer is going to function
Yeah.
in the normal business scenario. The business impact would be so much more than just the unit testing. But that is what you've agreed to as a customer with the
Mm-hmm.
implementation partner. So you ain't got much leg to remove. So there is a gap between that unit testing and the what can go into production. So
Yeah.
you need to put some sort of a gate in and you need to evaluate the levels of unit testing that they've done,
Mm-hmm.
some sort of oversight into what have you done in terms of unit testing. You don't want to repeat what they've done,
Yeah.
but you want to know that they've done it, and then you want to take care of from there. You need to say, okay, I've received that, you've done the unit testing, and I'm happy with that. From
Mm-hmm.
now on, it's our job or the customer's job to look at the integration testing, the system integration testing, the user
Mm-hmm.
acceptance testings, or the business acceptance testing, all of those sort of areas before the customer is confident, look, I'm going to put this in production, my business is going to run on this, and I'm happy with that. Or at
Yeah.
least I understand where it's short. So, I understand there are some risks. I've found these bugs, but I'm still happy to go live with that. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
have that level of clarity, then you're going in blind saying, okay, I'm going to go into production. And then you start picking up bugs in production, you start causing business operational failures, all these sort of things.
Yeah. So you mentioned user acceptance testing there. Is that something that is also part of the quality assurance process? As in, so, in the way you run your business as independent quality assurance providers, or do you see this as really the responsibility of the actual end customer, the user acceptance testing, or is it something they would outsource to you from time to time?
It depends. I mean, if the user is, let's assume it's a user who's been using Salesforce and they're migrating over to Dynamics CRM, they know how to do their day-to-day activity in Salesforce, but they don't fully understand how that process flow will work in a similar fashion or the same fashion within D365. They don't know what menu option to select. They don't know. So if that's the case, then they're going to only be testing what they know. So they'll have a lack of full understanding of what they're testing, and they could be testing, if you take a draw a big circle, they could be just testing a small part of that circle instead of testing the whole package. So we do help a lot of customers do the user acceptance testing because we understand the D365 process flow. We've seen a number of different ways it's configured for different customers. So we will spend some time in understanding how the user requirements are, but after that we can test the D365 implementation to make sure that it's meeting their requirements. So we can either help them, sometimes we help them in terms of putting some sort of management oversight. Sometimes we actually do the whole testing. So the users will then look at what we've done and then say, okay, you've done this test, I'm happy with that, let's move on. And that has 2 or 3 benefits. One is that users, depending on the type of users, some could be very costly exercise to take users off from their daily work to do the user acceptance testing, in which case, we would be far more competitive in terms of costs. So that's the sort of things where people make that decision.
Yeah, interesting. When talking about business impact, I've seen scenarios where, and what comes to mind is an agile project I was involved with, and, a field was asked to be placed on a form. And so, without too much thought, the field was placed on the form and it tested as functional, etc. But the business impact to that was it was located in a difficult to access area. If you like, it wasn't intuitive to the user. Is that part of what you look at from a business impact, like how efficient something runs, as in how friendly or user friendly it is?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we look at all of that just to make sure that our philosophy is to make sure the business is impacted as low as possible. That is the approach that we take. And sometimes the business users are not really, I'm not saying they're naive to that, but they're not experienced in looking at all these different aspects. And, we try to put a risk-based approach into the testing, so that we spend majority of our time spending the testing or spending our efforts on the high risk areas rather than on the low risk areas. Yeah, that's what we tend to do.
Excellent. So I'm going to ask you to switch hats, and I'll give you one scenario, then another scenario, which is the same, but from different positions. If you are a company that has just had a Microsoft partner implement Dynamics 365, and there was no quality assurance, and all of a sudden you get a Hail Mary call to come and carry out quality assurance, what's the kind of process that you would run through with that company, with that customer, to put a quality assurance process in place and get them to a point of, live in production?
Well, that's the scenario that we encounter majority of the time. It's something that they have not thought about, and then they finally come to the conclusion, we are lacking a quality assurance. Right. And we need to bring somebody in. So we come in and we have a look at what they currently have in place in terms of what's their quality requirements, and what is the current process, and how do they do the testing at the moment, and what is the gap between that and the industry best practice, and how we think you should do it, and then sort of give them an overview of a document or a slide deck that says these are where we think you're failing, and this is where you need to beef up on to be able to do that. And if you want to help, we can do it by doing this. It's what we call sometimes we call it a test process review or a quality review, and we've done that for a number of different customers. Yeah.
Are you seeing a discrepancy in working for companies of their maturity level around quality assurance? Is it more of an afterthought, or are you seeing a move to companies, when implementing Microsoft business applications, to much more have it, from the get-go in their projects?
We have talked to a number of customers who are very mature, and they understand that quality is important, and they involve people like us at the beginning stages. So we get involved at a very high level from the requirements sort of stage, and we get involved partly during the development stage, and then we take on majority of the work during the end phase in terms of the quality. But there are cases where we've had. Let me just step out a little bit. Some of the reasons why these things happen and the maturity is not there all the time is because It's not always if it's a large organization, it's not always the IT department that's
Yeah.
implementing the CRM or the ERP. Sometimes it's the sales department or the marketing department that is implementing the D365. And in some cases, it's isolated from the major IT department who has all these
Yeah.
processes and procedures in place. So they then tend to just do it themselves and get an implementation partner and do it, and then we'll just get some users to test it, and then we'll go from there. So they have that lack of experience in doing that. Similarly with the finance and operations, sometimes it's driven by the finance team. And they do somehow bring in the IT, but not as so collaboratively as we would preferably like. So there tends to be a little bit of gap in understanding the level of requirement or level of maturity in quality. So yeah, we tend to go in and look at the quality gaps and help them understand where they're failing and then try to help them with that.
Excellent. So then switching hats and now looking at from a partner, a Microsoft partner, let's say they have a Dynamics 365 practice, and to date, quality assurance hasn't featured on their radar and they don't know a lot about it. Do you work with companies like that as well to help them, if you like, put in systems into all of their projects so that they can address the quality assurance component of their delivery?
There are two or three challenges to implementation partners. I mean, one is that they sometimes tend to they may have a reasonably good process for quality, but they tend to have a lack of resources. So they tend to use their business analysts or their developers to go and do testing for a little while, which is not ideal because a tester is somebody who's a bit of a pedantic person. There is a slightly difference in profile of a tester than to a developer or a business analyst. So they tend to use that and they tend to not do it as well. So we work with partners in two or three ways. Sometimes they go to the customer and say, look, we will do the implementation for you, and here's a partner who will do the testing and QA for you. We think that will give you an independent verification of our implementation, and therefore gives you a lot more confidence that our delivery is going to be good. And it also helps in terms of, usually the implementation partner says, well, I'm going to do this for this much money. And then towards the end, the budget's running out and both are fighting each other. And, if we're there, then we can be a third party to really fully make the other parties understand where the gap is and how we can come together and resolve it in a satisfactory manner to the customer. So we're not about confrontation with the partner or the customer. We're about trying to get the best deal for the customer in terms of delivering him the right product.
Yeah. So we talk from that partner view then, so the lack of resources and using, if you like, not trained resources around quality assurance, and from that point of view, they don't necessarily have that pedantic nature of testing and probably, maybe a bit forgiving. I remember a quote years ago I heard at Ignite conference, and they said, a developer can never test their own work.
That's right.
It's just there's a bias, right? There's a built-in bias to overlook.
Yeah, it's like, if your daughter or son comes home one day and said, hey, daddy, look, teacher said to me I could mark my own homework.
Yeah.
How would you feel at that point? You'll think, oh my God,
yeah.
that's really going to help. So, that's the scenario. So, it's good to have an independent verification. And I think it's good to have an independent verification from somebody who knows the product that you're testing, deep understanding of D365.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we've invested heavily on. We've probably got about 60 or 30 certified D365 consultants.
Wow.
That's certified in not just D365, but also in testing and also the automated testing, which I'd like to come on to a little bit when we get a bit of time.
Yeah. So no, let's move there now. So tell me about automated testing and how you see that process working on a Dynamics project.
Okay, I mean some people are using DevOps processes. So the idea that you have a CI/CD pipeline and you You kick off a build, and then it goes and automatically does some testing and gives you a report. And if it all passes, then it goes on to do the next thing, which maybe do some performance scalability testing and maybe some security scanning and testing. And then at the end, if all passes, goes through some authorization, and then it releases into production. That should all be automatic, and that's the idea behind the DevOps and the CI/CD pipeline. So if you're going to do that, then you need automated tests to be able to do that. And what we tend to do is, within testing, there's a phase called regression testing, which is any test that you keep doing, because every time you make a change, you want to make sure that it's not impacted the system. So you build up a set of regression tests. And our philosophy is always to automate those regression tests rather than spending people redoing the test manually all the time. Any repetitive tasks, is the same as the RPA sort of scenario, the process automation. If it's repetitive processes, automate it. So similarly within testing, if it's a repetitive testing scenario, we automate it. And the other benefit of automation is that, you've got D365, which is going to give you, which is evergreen and not the 6 monthly, but every now and then they're going to give you new releases.
Exactly.
And if those patch releases come in, and if you're confident, I don't mind, I'll take that to production without any testing, then good luck to you. But I would assume that most mature people will be a bit prudent and say, I don't want to take that risk. I want to make sure that it's going to work okay. And if you're going to do that every time, then you're going to have this regression test pack that you're going to re-execute by manually every time, which is going to be costly, and it's going to really add to your budget every year. So if you automate it, we can take that regression test back and automate it, and you can execute those. If you're on the DevOps pipeline, we could plug it into your DevOps pipeline. It will automatically create the environment, load up the test and run the test and give you the report. Or if we do it for some customers where we just automate and we run it for them on a regular basis, and we update it and maintain it. So we can build the test, automated tests, and we can give it to you, or we can maintain it and run it for you. The beauty of what we've done is that we've invested several man days, in terms of several man months or years even, to develop what's called an automation framework, which is using the tool. It sort of recognizes all the objects, and we put in, say for instance, let me give you a basic example. If you're doing an automated or a test, and you're logging into a screen, logging into the users, into the system, and then you're doing XYZ, and you're going to be doing that logging in. Let's assume you're going to log in every time you do that test, and you can take that login as a separate function and put it into a function library, so that if you make any changes to the test, you only have to change that one function library rather than every time. So that's just a very basic example, but we look at all of these things and make them into a lot of function libraries which we have built, which sits on our framework. And the framework works on 2 or 3 different tool sets at the moment. So, if customers have already got tools like, there's automated tools from Micro Focus called Unified Functional Test Suite. There is Selenium, which is an open source tool. There is also Microsoft Coded UI, which is part of the Visual Studio tool set, which is going to be out of fashion. And there's also things like RSet that's out there for automating. So whatever it is, you can work within the framework, and you can automate that. And that gives you a very strong, efficient way of automating, and efficient way of maintaining that automation, because under no illusion, Mark, that if you automate, it doesn't mean that it's going to stay static. You have to maintain, you have to have a level of effort in keeping that up to date. As you change the software, you need to maintain it and support it. So there is, otherwise, if you don't do that, it'll become shelfware very quickly, and all that investment will go to waste.
Yeah. So Microsoft do 2 major releases a year, but they then do ongoing releases that are, to a degree, unannounced, and in past months I've seen a few issues run by various customers running into issues with those releases that it might have happened overnight. What are you seeing from your perspective and all the various projects that your company's across? Are you seeing are very much, back when I started in this, and it was very much an on-premise world, and now we live in a cloud world, and therefore, the testing, I assume, is changed a lot. And back then it was kind of like rule of thumb, I'll wait for the first patch to come out from Microsoft before I'll roll into production, right? In other words, let somebody else find the problems. What are you seeing now in a cloud world where you don't get to choose to wait for patches? They get automatically put in. And, there's a lot of customers around the world running the technology, and sometimes things fall through the gaps. Are you picking up more of those for your customers and therefore giving them more peace of mind? How is that working for you, or what are you seeing?
Yeah, well, the beauty of this sort of automated test is that, once you automate it and it's working, you can run it as often as you like. You can, a lot of our customers are running it on a nightly basis, so they can pick up the bugs. So why not? Why not? It's not going to cost you anything. It's just there. The system is running it, and you get a report every morning, or you get you get an alert if there is a failure. So if there is a failure, you worry about it. Otherwise, you just carry on as normal. But you at least know beforehand, before 9 o'clock, and everybody's starting to use the system. Oop, there is a problem. At least you can do something about it. So automated test can really benefit customers, and the more you use it, the more the return on investment becomes higher. Because if you just leave it and you say, I'll only do it once a week, then you might have missed the bug during the week. But if you run it every night, or during the day, whatever you want to do, you can run it on a sandbox environment and make sure that everything is going okay on a regular basis, and only move it to production afterwards.
We talked about functional testing. How do you make sure, or how do you define ambiguous business requirements and kind of making sure they're met? Do you kind of sort them out before they're run? How do you address that?
Well, I mean, it's 90% of the case the requirements are ambiguous, and that's why most of the projects are failing. So, it is a case of understanding the business requirements as much as we can. We've gone into organizations where the requirements are several, not decades old, but a year or so old, and they haven't even updated it. And the actual development has gone so far ahead that it's no resemblance, and there is no requirements. And some people are obviously using user stories, which is a lot better and a lot in an agile way, and therefore we can capture that much better. But we don't. In terms of what we do, we can do it best if there is defined user stories or properly defined user requirements. So what we do is something called a test traceability matrix. So we take a requirement, and then we say, right, this is the requirement. What tests can we run to make sure each of those requirements are met? And if we have coverage of that's the ideal solution. So if we don't have it, then what we tend to do is we tend to look at the developed solution and then work out the workflow within that, and then re-engineer the requirements in effect, and then write the tests for that. So ideally, it should be that if we're involved from the beginning, these are the benefits of involving the testing. I'm not saying there's people like us, but even internal test teams, they should be involved very early in the stage, so they know the requirements well, and as they're changing, they can adapt as well.
So is it a very black and white process? In other words, the test is passed or the test has failed. There's no kind of like gray area of interpretation in what you do? Or is there sometimes still a gray area as an output of the testing?
There is an element of gray area, and there are sometimes people interpret certain things, especially the users, and say, I'll do it this way and I get this result. That's a bug. And we say, well, when you don't, if you do it this way, you get the right result. So it's a matter of understanding for the user to understand the application well enough to be able to do the process flow in the correct way.
Yeah.
So there are gray areas in some cases, and that's when some disputes happen between the customer and the implementation partner. And they'll say, well, no, this is a bug. And then we turn around and say, well, no, it's really not. It's a lack of understanding on your part on how it could be done. Yes, there is an element of gray area. Yeah.
So again, tell me a bit about your risk-based approach when it comes to testing.
Okay. Fundamentally, any risk-based approach should be based on the twin facets of probability of failure based on previous experience or defect yield history, etc., coupled with the consequence of the failure, i.e. the business impact and the overall project or the program. So the combination of those will define the risk-based approach. And really, at the end of the day, you can't test every single scenario. It's impossible. You'll spend forever doing that.
Yeah, so the cost of benefit, I assume, runs out at some point.
Yeah. So what you've got to do is you've got to take out the out-of-the-box features that is not subject to change. And you must look at the areas of high risk, which of these things are. And high risk can be because of business criticality or technical complexity, and you can focus on those. So it could be this particular requirement is of key importance to the business, and if that fails, that's going to really cause a lot of problems for the business and cost a lot of money. Then you need to focus on those ones, and also you need to focus on this bit of code is an integration with so and so, and it can impact so many different areas by that one integration, because there's an information flow coming in from here to go and impact that one, but it impacts so many different areas. Then you focus on those. So that will be one of the areas of that. And also the items of risk are also constantly we constantly monitor them and action them as well. So that will be our approach to the risk-based testing. To make sure. So the idea behind it is that if you've got $1 to do the QA or $1 to do the testing, you want to spend that $1 most efficiently testing out the biggest risk that you've got.
Yeah, makes sense. Are there qualification standards around testing and that are kind of like industry norms or industry certification standards that people generally talk about when it comes to QA?
Yeah, there is something called ISTQB, which is a foundation. It's the British Computer Society's exam foundation in software testing, and then they go up a next level, and then you've got practitioner as well to be somebody who's a real authority in terms of testing. And we have a number of people within the organization who are that sort of practitioner level, but all our people are sort of ISTQB qualified for foundation. And what does that do for you? You might say, well, that's, what does a certification doesn't mean? It means that you're all talking the same language. So when I talk about risk-based approach, they know what I mean. When I talk about test traceability matrix, they know what I mean. When I talk about a black box testing, they know what I mean. Yeah. They understand the difference between priority and severity. All of those things are sort of taught at the ISTQB Foundation for Software Testing. So that helps. And obviously then you need to go into the actual experience of testing to understand fully what actually happens there. So, if you've got people who are ISTQB qualified and D365 certified, and, that's a good start to having a team of people that actually can do testing for you in your organization.
Yeah. Tell me about what the benefits are for hiring an independent quality assurance provider for Dynamics 365 projects. Over basically, companies going, listen, we'll do it in-house. And I'm not really even thinking about partners here. I'm thinking about, the end user organization going, you know what, we'll pick up the cost of doing testing and we'll do it in-house over using an independent, quality assurance provider.
Okay. The one thing is that if you don't have, not many companies will have, within their testing department, people with D365 experience. So what they tend to do is either teach them D365 or say, oh, go and learn D365 and then you can come and test it, which is not ideal by any stretch of the imagination because they don't know the product. Or they say, okay, we'll bring in some D365 certified consultants on an independent basis or whatever, and they're going to build a team of testers together to put that. But what they lack in that sense is the approach and how are you going to take this, because they all think independently, they all think differently. There is no management, there is no structure in place. How are we going to approach this D365 project? What are the gaps? What are we going to do? What is needed? A test strategy for that whole project is something that needs to be developed. So the benefit of having somebody as an independent would be that they would work. The primary objective for them would be to make sure that as many of the bugs are found in an efficient manner, using the money, that the budget that's available for QA, to use it efficiently and to reduce the number of risks within that. Now, the benefit that somebody like us will bring is that we've got experience of testing D365 on number of different projects that we can, and also sort of intellectual property. I wouldn't call it IP in the straightest sense of the word, but sort of assets and accelerators that can help in making the whole testing go faster and smoother and much more efficiently. So we're not reinventing the wheel all the time.
Yeah. What challenges do you see facing the industry? And I'm not meaning just from a QA perspective. Are you seeing anything across the projects that you're doing, the Microsoft partners that are implementing these projects, are you seeing any kind of gaps or challenges, and what are they?
Well, the majority is around the skilled resources. That's one of the big challenges
Right.
that we're finding in D365. There isn't that many skilled resources available, whether it's for development, analysis, or any of the different areas within the IT side for consultants to help you do that. I think there is and people like you with MVPs. There's what's that, about five of you in the world, or 10 of those in the world.
There's a few more than that. There's a few more than that.
But it is there's a very small number of you. But I mean, as you come down the pyramid, with you guys at the top, the numbers are getting smaller and smaller, and there should be a lot more in there. That's one thing. People are only now beginning to realize the importance of quality. I'm not saying it because people are really. Before, you look at the other ERP providers like SAP or Oracle, they all have a quality gate inbuilt within their development lifecycle. Whereas within the D365, it's not so prominent.
Interesting.
And similarly with the implementation partners, there are only handful of implementation partners who have an in-house QA team. So, that in itself says there is a gap there.
Yeah. My last question before we get on to some quick fire questions and wrap up is quick fire. So
Wow.
these ones put you on the spot type thing, but they're more about you and life rather than about QA.
Okay.
So tell me about the Power Platform. Dynamics 365 is now morphed, and what we have is the platform separation, the Power Platform, and then within the Power Platform we have three core components: Power BI, Microsoft Flow, and Power Apps, which is Power Apps is really that traditional Dynamics experience from a model-driven experience. Are you seeing more requests around how do we test Power Apps and flows and dashboards and things like that? Or has that not really surfaced so much as yet?
No, I mean, that's what the comments that I'm getting from everybody I go within Microsoft is that, why are you focusing just on Dynamics? Why don't you be just looking at the Flow and Power Apps? So we are investing in open source AI framework so that we can test using AI for more focused on the Power Apps and Microflow. So if we can bring AI to that, then that will speed up. For instance, if you can think of an AI solution that I can actually look at the application, identify the flow, and then create test scripts and deliver those test scripts in a usable format. That's a big asset. So we're working on that. So we're not ignoring Microsoft Flow or Power Apps at the moment.
Yeah, no, very good, very good. Who would you recommend as a guest on the podcast in future?
I would recommend one of your colleagues, actually.
Which one?
Andrew Bibby. I think that he's. I don't know. I don't know whether you involve people like MVPs on there, but Andrew Bibby would be. I had a recent chat with him, and he was very much glued on about testing and the understanding of QA and the importance of QA, or the lack of importance of QA within the existing projects. It should be improved. Or somebody like one of our customers, I'm happy to recommend.
Awesome. Okay, you ready for some quick fire questions?
Yes, he's frightened me, Mark.
Okay, here's your first one. Would you rather win the lottery or live twice as long?
I would rather win the lottery, I think.
Are you less scared now about my questions?
Yes.
Okay, here's a random one. What's your guilty pleasure?
Guilty pleasure. Chocolate.
Chocolate's nice. What's your dream car?
Aston Martin DB9. James Bond. Shug Bond.
What was your favorite subject in school?
Physics.
Interesting. If you could never work again, how would you spend your time?
To be honest, I since I've started this business, I've not looked back, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. And I don't think about getting up to go to work. I get up to see what change I can make on a daily basis. So I would hate to be not working, not doing what I'm doing.
Nice. The last one here. What is something you think everyone should do at least once in their lives?
Run a marathon.
Wow.
I haven't done it yet. I've done half a marathon, and that took everything out of me. But it makes you realize. It makes you look at yourself a little bit. When you're doing that, pushing yourself that hard, it you look at yourself and then you realize how really weak you are.
Yeah. Very good, very good. Sug, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. If people want to connect with you, what's the best place for them to do that?
I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can contact me by my email address, shug@testhouse.net, or you can go to our website, Testhouse, and you can connect, and it will come through. If you ask it to come through to me, it will come through to me. And we'd love to hear from anybody about anything I've said. And if they want to explore any of that, if they want help with any of that, I'm more than happy to take a call, and love to chat with customers and understand their challenges a little bit.
Thanks again for joining me today on the Dynamics 365 show. Full show notes on this episode, go to nz365guy.com/130. I'm your host, Business Applications MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 Guy. Don't miss out on anything Microsoft. Subscribe now at nz365guy.com or join my YouTube channel at youtube.com/NZ365Guy. I post videos twice a week, one on Mondays, which is really about how to become an MVP currently, and I also do a live stream with Steve Mordew every week at Wednesday. If you go up to the website, you'll see the scheduled live stream for this week. I'm always open to your feedback, comments, or any insights that you would like to share. Feel free to reach out to me. Bye for now.